Hey family, what's going on? My name's Justin. This is my boy Landon, and this is another episode of Mental Caffeine. Today, we wanted to take a minute to talk about self-care and why your self-care might not be working for you. So with that being said, my boy, you ready to get into it?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Landon, my boy, how you been, dude? How's it going?
I'm
What you been
great,
up to?
man. I'm doing really well. I've been it's been the Halloween season. It's my favorite
Spooky
time of
time.
year. It's my favorite holiday. So I've just been killing it with horror movies. Been playing some scary games, which I know are your favorite. I know you love scary stuff, Justin.
Yeah, dude, love it so much that I never ever do it.
But no, I'm good. It's just that it's a good time of year for me. I always look forward to just kind of like the Halloween fall season. It really gets me in the mood to like kind of dive into some of the things I love. But what about you? What have you been up to?
Man, I just been chilling, just working, doing a bunch of stuff. I recently took a week off work so I could go to a training, so I feel real juiced up and primed up, fresh back into the research stuff, and it's real fun. You know I dig that kind of stuff, boy. I could talk about it for an hour if you let me.
In fact, you can talk about it so much. You've thought about starting a podcast and talking about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. If
So
only I had a good friend of mine who could co-pilot that thing with me. That'd
yeah,
be crazy.
I'll let you know if I find someone.
Hey, let them know I'm ready to sell out whenever it's time.
I'm I'm sure he's right behind you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my boy. So, man, today I thought it'd be fun. Last time we talked about, well, we've been talking about a bunch of different stuff. We walked through our 20s, walked through our 30s, different things related to that. Um, Somewhere along the line, we've talked about self-care and the idea of doing those things that are important to your own mental health. And that got me thinking, man, when it comes to self-care, that stuff gets thrown around all the time, man. Self-care this, self-care that. And sometimes I wonder if it's become a thing that doesn't actually mean anything, you know, as far as like the definition gets lost over time.
Yeah, it's very very buzzwordy. Like you hear it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so I just thought it'd be fun for us to kind of unpack some of that, man, about what we might think it is and why it might be limiting for some people and why maybe they have attempted self-care and it just didn't do the thing that they had heard on TikTok that it would. By the way, follow us on TikTok, Mental Caffeine at TikTok. Holla at your
Hey, there you
boys.
go. There you go. We get the plug. We got the plug in, or at least one of the plugs. We got it in earlier than normal. So
Yes, sir. Yes,
we
sir.
just throwing it right at you
We,
today.
we learning. We learning. We learning how to do
Oh
this
yeah.
thing. We learning how to do this
Oh yeah.
thing.
Yeah. 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 So you threw this. So you threw this topic at me. It's been a couple weeks ago now, and I always like to, you know me. I always like to kind of ask you what sparked it, or kind of what got you. I mean, I guess what just kind of got you aiming to
Mm-hmm.
talk about this. So did anything like maybe happen in life or happen at work, or just kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, man. So I'll answer it in two ways, Landon.
Okay.
Professionally and then personally, right? So
Sure.
professionally, self-care is super important, man. Self-care is super important, especially in this world that we live in where so many things require our attention all the time. And as you might know, it's really difficult to provide all the levels of effort to everything that we want to provide it to all the time in every way. And that takes resources mentally, emotionally, and everything else. And so being able to recharge and replenish, man, it's so important. And I think that our culture in general doesn't always advocate for that kind of stuff. And if I think people are becoming more and more aware of it, and I think it needs to be talked about more often. Now, on a personal level, your boy is a therapist. I'm not nobody's therapist on this particular platform here. I'm just a guy with some thoughts who has a degree. But personally, in my life, man, self care has been a struggle because at different parts of my life before I became a working professional, I used to believe that self care was for people who had enough money to actually be able to afford to take care of themselves. And so my perspective on that has changed. My paradigm around that has shifted a little bit. And so because of that, I'm trying to advocate more for that, not only for others, but also for myself. So talking about it helps reinforce, some of those same ideas and perspectives that I need to kind of hold on to there.
Nice, nice. Yeah, when you brought this topic up to me, Funny enough, one of the first things that popped in my head, like, and I'm sure we're gonna get into, like the proper ways to participate in self care, the benefits of it, all that good stuff. But actually, the first thing that popped in my head was the misconceptions and almost the ways that, kind of going back to that buzzwordy thing we were talking about, how people will take self care and misconstrue exactly what that means, and a lot of times it loses its meaning. And I think that, you know at its core, self care is a very important thing, and I want to stress that ultimately it is a very important thing. But I also think it can be like anything else in life; it can be taken a little too far, and it can be detrimental depending on how you approach self care and what your definition of that actually is. So I'm sure we're going to get into all of that, but I just thought it was interesting how when you brought this up to me that's kind of where my brain went because I mean, you know me, like I do think self care is very important, but I also think it is a term that can be abused a bit,
Hmm.
for lack of better phrasing, I guess. So, and so we'll get into all that, I'm sure.
Sure, man. Sure. So let's actually do that now, man. Let's talk about self
Yeah.
care and maybe my slight qualms with that with that wording there. So self care usually traditionally means taking care of the individual, taking care of the self, and not necessarily that that's a bad thing inherently, Landon. What I think happens though when we talk about it in those terms, and use those words, self care, we emphasizing two main things. One of them is about this idea of that the self is somehow separate and disconnected from everything else. Right? When you're focusing on you, at least traditionally speaking, then by definition you're not focusing on other things, responsibilities, needs, whatever else you could be focusing on. You're solely focusing on me, myself, and I type thing. And secondarily, it's heavily focused on individualism. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be, but at least in the larger narratives that get passed around, at least from what I've seen, it's a big emphasis on isolation and individualism. Like you should go somewhere by yourself, away from everything, be on a beach somewhere, and that's somehow magically going to make you feel completely better about everything in your life, and then that's going to be everything that you need, right? And for some people, it works. For a lot of people, it doesn't. And I thought it'd be fun for us to talk a little bit about why that might
Yeah.
be. But let me ask you, man. You're
Yeah.
not in the same sphere that I operate in on a daily basis. So, from your point of view, man, as someone who's you know not involved in mental health every day, what have you heard about self care? What is the kind of main ideas around self care that you've been exposed to over time?
Oh man, that's a big question. And I think largely it depends on who you ask or who you talk to, because we've all got different ideas of what self care is, right? And it actually kind of works out that this is I guess, the topic for this week, because I've been in the middle of taking some time off from work. So I have been actively participating in what my version and kind of what my idea of self care for myself is. But going back to kind of what I meant by it just depends on who you ask. For some people, self care is, kind of doing what I did, just staying home, reclusing a little bit, participating in your hobbies, and just kind of just taking it easy and really doing kind of a whole lot of nothing. For other people, it's the opposite. They may not be at work, but they may, all right, well, I got to fill my time with activities. I've got to fill my time and go somewhere and do something. So, it looks different for different people. And, and I, and it's kind of going back to alluding to what I was talking about earlier, how I also think that self-care for some can be destructive because some of the things that they participate in, some of the habits that they get involved in, they see it as self-care. They see it as a release, so to speak, when in reality, maybe long term, it's maybe not the best thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just one, and we don't have to like get into the nitty gritty of it, but just kind of one example that I think about that is maybe somebody who has like a drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
They'll get to the end of a long week or something, and sure, like in the moment that may feel good, but obviously long term, not the best thing for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just a small example. There's all kinds of things I could throw out. But it is this idea of self care is a very TikToky, buzzwordy, popular term that gets thrown around, and I don't want to misconstrue. I am glad that it's at the forefront because I think I would argue we have generations of people that don't even know how to take care of themselves whenever they do have downtime. So I don't want to make the mistake and say that it's not important, but like many things, in life, we need to just frame it properly, and
Right.
we need to establish what productive, healthy self care is versus maybe some of the traps that we can fall in with that. So
Absolutely,
I know
dude.
I was a little all over the place there, but hopefully that kind of answers what you were throwing at me.
No, man, absolutely. And I think we might not be able to have a full fleshed out conversation about this part in particular right here, Landon, unless you feel like we need
Hmm.
to, or if our audience feels like we need to. But
Hey, we can always cover it if people want it.
yeah,
So
of course, of course. But let me just highlight two kind of main what I believe to be misconceptions about self care. One of them is about the thing that I held on to for a while, which was that you have to have enough money in order to be able to afford the ability for self care. Um, we'll talk about that a little bit, but then the other one, and I want to see if you've heard this, Landon, because I've heard this a lot, that self care is often framed as a feminine thing to participate in, that regular
interesting.
self care. Like not self care as in once a
Oh,
year I go hunting with my family and them. I'm talking about weekly or maybe even daily acts of self care. A lot of times, from what I can tell anyway, it seems to be framed around feminine kind of approaches to stuff. And there's not a whole lot, at least from what I've seen, a whole lot of masculine or masculine oriented type self care that gets championed as self care. Lots of times it's reworded as something different, and a lot of times it seems like it's not always matched to that phrase of self care there. And I think that could be really important, man, because I think a lot of guys in particular need lots of self care or lots of care of self in general. And
mhm.
and if we only ever see it as a masculine or as a feminine quality, or if we only ever see it as you have to have enough money to participate in that, then lots of people find themselves underneath a lot of burden and don't have any relief from that. And that can be a big struggle.
Yeah. So something and maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit here, but what is something that you like to do that maybe you interpret as self-care for you? What is something that maybe helps you out?
Yeah, yeah. To answer that question, Len, and I will answer that question directly. I promise.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
let me just break down a little bit of how I understand this idea of self when it comes to the phrase self care. Self a lot of times gets framed as something, again, like we said earlier, disconnected from others, individualistic, and kind of stands alone outside of our responsibilities, our sense of purpose, our families, our friends, and all these things. I don't believe that that's possible, that we can fully separate those things. I think that who we view ourselves to be is shaped by all those things that I just named. So the idea that we can find fulfillment or we can find replenishment by separating ourselves from all these things that make us into the person that we are, and that somehow that's going to provide us long lasting replenishment is not super useful of a view in my perspective. And so when it comes to self care, I think it's important to address all the things that make up the self, not just the individual body, not just the individual mind, but all the things that we are connected to. And maybe we'll go ahead and lead into our first point there, Landon, if that's
Yeah.
all right with you. And that is that
Yeah, let's do it.
um, that seeing ourself as more than just our body and our mind. It's also about things like our goals and our dreams and our desires and our families and our responsibilities and our things that bring us enjoyment and happiness. The reason it's important to address all of these things is because all of those things make up the self. And again, to reemphasize, we can't just cleanly separate all that out. And so when we think about self-care, usually we're going to use that in terms of in a synonymous term of replenishment. When we think about being replenished, well, it depends on why we're being depleted. If I'm in need of replenishment because I'm overstimulated, that's a very different journey, or can be, than if I feel overly burdened with chronic responsibilities. And even that can be different from I feel isolated and lacking emotional connection. And even that can be different from I have an existential feeling of anxiety because of larger factors that I have no control over, right? Like all these things can drain us, and the drain can feel different, and sometimes that requires a need to be met that is slightly different depending on whatever the problem is. So to say it simply, self-care happens in an effective way when we match it to whatever the issue is or whatever we need replenishment from.
Yeah, that's why, like, I guess the reason I asked you kind of like, I guess, individually what you would see as self care for you is because I do think it's a very individual thing. And also, to your point, it's depending on maybe what you need replenishing at the time or maybe what you're going through life at the time. Because you'll see a lot of like, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, you'll see a lot of things on social media, these kind of like blanket ways of taking care of yourself. Now, some of those things are like objectively good for you. Like, hey, like exercising, like, pretty that's for the most part that's pretty black and white, assuming you don't have something keeping you from participating in exercise. But objectively that is good for you. Like there's just
100%.
a lot that backs that. But then but then it gets a little bit more gray when you start talking about individually what people are going through. And so, and I'm not going to let you get away. I'm going to circle back to kind of what I was
Mm-hmm.
asking you. What are and I know that this is like this can ebb and flow and the answer can change, but is there any areas of your life that maybe you're trying to participate a little bit more in self-care or things that you've identified? And if so, what are you doing to maybe kind of remedy some of those areas?
Right, right. So to blend those two things together, Landon. So my
Hmm.
thing that I found that I deal with on a more regular basis is more of the day to day being needed for different things. As you know, I do a lot of things with work and work adjacent things, and sometimes my mind is always running on something, which I enjoy, I really do, but it comes at a certain cost, and that cost
Mm.
can be something like exhaustion. And here at Mental Caffeine Landing, we're all about knowing yourself. And one of the things I know about myself is that whenever I get to a certain point, when I push myself mentally to a certain point, my body will feel the stress way before my mind does. There's just
Mm.
something about the way things are wired, but that my body will tell me that I'm feeling stress or feeling whatever the feeling is, and that I need some replenishment on that level. That's the kind of difficulty that I face on a more regular basis, and so for that, the remedy that I found for that is physical exercise. Because if my body holds on to stress in a different way than my mind does, then I need to access the body in order to be able to replenish it in that way, or replenish that whole process there. So I found that if I regularly exercise, and regularly being like 2 to 4 times a week, then I feel better. I feel more replenished on a daily basis. Outside of that, man, it's sleep. Prioritizing sleep.
Yeah.
My stuff, man, mentally, as you know, I think about therapy and break down things in my mind for fun, and
Well,
it's kind
you
of
made it.
dorky.
You made it your life. I
I
mean, you've
did.
made it your life commitment. So,
I did. And at night, especially when I'm thinking of cases or I'm thinking of interesting topics that we want to try to cover here on this platform, my
mhm.
mind can stay up and just keep going and going. And so I have to prioritize sleep. I invested into different things that improve quality of sleep. And at a certain time, I go to bed. And at a certain time, I wake up. And giving myself that rhythm, that routine to the best that I can, that certainly has helped on a daily basis to engage in self-care. Um, and at least on an individual physical level, those are the types of things that I enjoy. But just to kind of branch out, and then I want to pass it over to you and see what you do for things like this. But
Yeah.
those things that I named are physical and individual. But I can do those things. I can do those things for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But if I'm not engaging socially with the people that I care about, then I'm still lacking a certain level of self care. I haven't nurtured that need, right? The need to be seen, heard, validated, whatever it is, right? And so while in the midst of doing that, I have to also try to find time to engage in some level of social activity. As you and I, with some of our other friends, we get together, we're around each other, we watch sports together, we play video games together, we do these things. If I don't have the social fulfillment, right, then I'm going to be lacking in a certain way, in a different way. So my body might not be stressed, my mind might not be stressed, but my social capacities have not been attuned to, they haven't been fulfilled in that way. If I'm taking care of my body and hitting these social, phenomena, but I'm not feeling a sense of fulfillment in the things that I'm pushing myself towards or doing in those ways, then I haven't met that need. I haven't taken care of that aspect of the self. Or if I'm not doing things, in my case individually, and yours as well, but in our case individually, Landon, if I'm not doing things, taking care of my faith and things on a spiritual level, well then I'm not taking care of the self in that way. And now here's
Mm.
the thing, Landon, as you can tell by just me naming these things, it's really difficult to hit all these things every single day, 100% of
Sure.
the time. What I have to do then is take a check of myself and say, what is the need that I need to be met within the self today? And again, sometimes that means I need to go connect with people more than I need to go to the gym. Sometimes that means I need to go to bed before, way more than it means that I need to stay up and play games with my friends. Sometimes that
Right.
means I need to go and take care of some faith related things or some fulfillment related things before I need to go take care of these other things. And that is ways in which I think about addressing the needs of the whole self and not just the individual physical experience of it all. So, me saying that, I want to pass it over to you and see what
Yeah.
do you think about self-care? What do you do for those things on the physical level, on the social level, all those things that we named? And you feel free to pass it back and forth to me, but I want to just
Sure.
kind of open it up to you and see what you think.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm in the middle of kind of a mini vacation. I took a little bit of time from work, and currently where I'm working at is it's one of the more physical demanding jobs that I've had in my life. So, while I'm not as mentally tired from it, I am physically tired more than I used to be in the past. So these past few days of it has just been me just relaxing at home, playing games, watching shows, and you know me, Justin. Those are things that I enjoy a lot. But I want to touch again on, kind of the things that we need in the moment, depending on, what needs to be remedied at the time. So I have I think I have one more day. I have one more day of this like little time off that I've taken. And tomorrow I'm gonna probably try to get out and actually like just kind of do some things and be a little more active because it's not that those things that I've been doing are things that I've just like, magically stopped enjoying in the last 24 hours. But I personally believe there's a balance there where you can have a little bit too much of something. And even now I can feel it. Like, okay, like I've been home for like the past 3, 4 days. I've gotten to enjoy some of these things, but like I'm starting to feel like, okay, I want to mix it up again, before I have to go back to work and do something. And so that's where kind of that ebb and flow and things change. So as far as like more, I guess, consistent things that I do for self care, it is, of course, to participating in those hobbies, like I said. But I think actually a really big one that I don't really talk about a lot, but a big one for me is reading. Not that I'm like some, not that I'm like some avid like, oh, I read 100 books a year,
Hmm.
but for me personally, there's something about just sitting on the back porch, especially this time of year because the weather's awesome. Um, just sitting out on the back porch and just having a physical, not a screen. I want to stress that, not a screen, because if there's anybody who spends a lot of time in front of a screen, it's me. I'll be the first one to admit it.
Right.
So I think that there's something refreshing about sitting down with just a book.
Hmm.
Because there was a time in my life, especially as a kid, where I didn't have as many screens around me and that it was more book oriented, particularly when I was like in elementary school. So it kind of takes me back to it does. It takes me back to a simpler time where I can just kind of laser in on what's in front of me. I'm not so overstimulated, and it centers me in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. If I can just take some time and read a book,
Hmm.
that's a big one for me, personally.
Excellent, man. And there's so many other things, and I'm just going to lightly touch on a couple of things, man.
Mhm.
Um, Even things like, and you and I've been here before, man, on a Saturday afternoon when we're watching college football in our case, but
Mhm.
sports of any kind, and we have maybe ran the gamut on different foods and stuff like that that we're eating. Shout out
Dude,
to
I ain't gonna
chicken
lie.
wings.
I ain't gonna lie. Some of those weekends hurt me, man. I
Ye-
feel it. The
Right.
next
So
day, especially.
right, man. So that next day, sometimes, man, just getting a light salad or something easy.
Yeah.
That's self care, dude. That's care of the body.
Right.
On a food level. And again, all those things can be connected. And so to branch out a little bit, when your body feels better, when your mind feels better, you can be more attentive to the people around you that you care for. You can be more productive at work if you need to be productive. You can find an easier time having fulfillment in these other places. When you're burnt out and overstimulated and chronically lacking sleep, or your diet's not good, or your body isn't really like physically taken care of, whatever. When a need
Mhm.
that has been lacking hasn't been replenished for a sufficient amount of time, when you pay attention to it, you'll notice that it will start to affect everything else. And it will affect how you show up for the people that you love. It will affect how you show up to your job. It will affect how you think about the grand scope of your life and your sense of fulfillment with it. And when even you take care of yourself, but all those other things are lacking, you'll feel how that interacts with your sense of self, your sense of personhood, your sense of what you're here to do and why you're here to do it. Right? They're interconnected in ways, and I think it could be super super important, dude, to know that. And whether it's little things or big things, it all comes back to knowing where you're at, knowing what the need is that needs to be replenished. Sometimes, man, as you know, and we've said it already, but just to emphasize, sometimes some of these needs can't be met by yourself.
Oh no,
Sometimes,
absolutely not. We're social
sometimes,
creatures. Humans are social creatures.
absolutely, and sometimes you just need to get around people that you like and that you love. Sometimes you need to step away from everything. Sometimes you actually need to get more involved in things. And something you said earlier, man, I think it's important. Even when we think about like the physical stuff, like you said, your job is very physical, like very
Hmm.
physically demanding. You're up on your feet all the time. I think you walk like 5 or 7 miles a day or something like that, whatever that is.
Yeah, I need to actually look at because I'm genuinely curious, but yeah, and
Yeah.
the short of it is yes, I move around a lot.
So when we talk about the physical self care, like it's literally like your need is of a physical kind. Mine, dude, I probably get 1,000 steps a day.
Yeah.
I sit down a lot. When
Hmm.
I get off of work, man, the need is of a mental kind. It's not necessarily of a physical kind. So I can
Right.
go to the gym and lift heavy weights. Well, heavy for me, but
Sure.
not actually objectively heavy, but like
Yeah. Did you
heavy
guys
for me.
know? Did you for the podcast listeners? Did you guys know Justin is ripped and has a six pack?
Oh, 100, yeah, yeah, dude. It's just buried under a couple things, but you know what?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so like, but the idea of me going to the gym after work and lifting some weight, for me, because my need is of a mental kind, I need a lack of mental stimulation and more physical stimulation. For you, man, if I asked you to go do that same workout immediately after work, not to say you couldn't, and
Sure.
not even to say you wouldn't, but if you did it, it wouldn't necessarily be replenishing the need that you have, right? Yours might be
Right.
more so physically, I need to decompress and deactivate for a little bit and
And,
stimulate the mind through reading or other things.
and we've crossed that bridge before. I've gotten that message, and I mean I've straight up been like, I love you boys, but I've been moving around all day. I don't need it. I promise you, I don't need it. But
Yep.
but it's still but it's still appreciated nonetheless because I totally get the intention there. So
Right, man. Right. And so like even to connect it to other things, man, like if you're having a need that needs to be met on some other level, it's important again to know what that is and how can we go about doing that? How can we go about meeting that? So if there's anything I
mhm.
can really highlight, man, is that the whole thing about there's just this blanket idea of what self-care is and that there's just do these 3 steps and you're immediately going to feel better. That ain't it, man. That ain't it. It can be. It can be if that's what the need is, if you need to be replenished on a particular level. But there's more than one level, man. There's more than one level. And it's all about knowing yourself, knowing what you need, and knowing how to try to get that stuff replenished when you can. And again, you can't always do it by yourself. So
That's right.
needing some help along the way is totally part of the human experience.
And of course, here on Mental Caffeine, we will continue to talk about topics such as self care and all that stuff. But I just want to quickly remind the audience that you can find us on TikTok, Spotify, and YouTube. We are Mental Caffeine on all three of those platforms. So please feel free to check us out, leave a comment, like all that good stuff. It really does help us out. We love you and we appreciate you. So I kind of want to, because it's been hanging in my head. I do want to pivot a little bit, Justin. So a lot of what we've been talking about, at least for the first, first half or so of this episode, maybe a little bit more, is kind of the proper ways to go about self care. But I do want to quickly hit on maybe some of the pitfalls people fall into with that term self care, and maybe some things that you see. Not necessarily just in your line of work, but maybe things that you see on your social platforms as well. So, what are some of those traps you see, or maybe some of the ways that people take self care and they twist it into ways that maybe isn't necessarily good for us.
Yeah, again, when we heavily focus on isolation and separation, I think that that can be a really detrimental thing. Again, not to say that it's not sometimes needed, but this idea that, as an example, if you have children and your role as a parent is very fulfilling to you, then maybe other people telling you that you just need to drop the kids off with the babysitter and go do something for yourself. But then the whole time you're out there doing something for yourself, you're just anxious and thinking about your children. Well, then whatever it is that you're out there doing for self-care, it ain't working because you're not replenishing the need that's there.
You think
And
it's might be self harm. I mean,
yeah,
if you're putting yourself in a
exactly.
position that is, not the best.
Exactly. Or if, you hear people talk about, well, you need time and space away from your partner. Maybe that's the case. And maybe objectively it is good to have time apart and time together. But if you're like shoehorning that in there because you want to meet the standards of somebody else who doesn't face the same level of need or desire that you do, then maybe you'll find yourself forcing yourself to separate or even forcing yourself back together because we're comparing ourselves to whatever normal is and thinking that we ought to do that and then being mad at ourselves for not finding it fulfilling or meaningful or replenishing. But again, it might not just be meeting the need for replenishment that we have. And again, it all comes back to it's not about tricks and tactics. It's about knowing
Hmm.
yourself enough to know what is it that you need at that particular time? What is it that's needed from you by the people around you at that particular time? And how can you help yourself get to a place where you can find it easier to meet those needs and to find fulfillment and happiness in the different things that you can? And so, real quick, Lenny, because I think,
Yeah,
we could turn back course if you need to, but I just want to use this
sure.
moment to highlight that you can always blend those things together.
Hmm.
If you, for instance, if you're chronically overstimulated, and that's a thing that you know that you deal with, at the same time you know that you don't want to, going back to our example from earlier, leave your kids with a babysitter, okay? Because yes, you're overstimulated, but the kids do not hit that overstimulation button. You don't mind being around them, you enjoy it, and those things. Then do both of those things. Take your babies to the park. Separate
Hmm.
yourself from the overstimulation, but also fulfill that connection to your children by taking them to the park or reading them a book or something like that. Or if you are mentally exhausted from work and you could use a little physical activity, it doesn't have to be individual. Take your partner, go for a walk, talk together. It doesn't have to be anything mentally stimulating. You can talk about different things that you've seen or different things that you want to know about each other. Or just, heck, there's a million apps out there. Just find one that forces you to ask deep questions about each other. If it's something, if you're physically exhausted, you know, then maybe you need to do something mental, but it doesn't have to be in isolation. It can be together with somebody. It can be part of a group. It could be, joining some kind of club of some sort. Whatever. It can be lots of things. It
Yeah.
can fulfill the social category and the mental stimulation, or the the thing with your partner and the fulfillment relationships and stuff like that. We can blend those things. We can always blend those things. But I think the emphasis a lot of times, when it gets placed on, you need to do one at a time, and you need to like do these three things, and it's the same for everybody, and it's just not the case. And when we think that it is, I think it serves to our detriment more times than it actually finds itself helpful.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times we'll find ourselves, you could be seeing somebody participate in something or do something, and in your head, you're like, Dude, that's like my worst nightmare. Like, I just don't see
Yeah,
how they're getting any fulfillment or relaxation or anything out of that situation.
yeah,
And meanwhile, in their head, it could be the most fulfilling thing that they've done that entire day, that week, or even that month. You just don't know.
100%.
So I just say that to say, like, people truly are different. And I think something kind of interesting to touch on here is I think it's important to almost, if because I do think there's people out there that maybe don't know. They don't know what it is that brings them self fulfillment or self care. A lot of that goes back to knowing who you are as a person, and people discover that at different rates. There's, and I'll just use you as an example because it's kind of the first thing that popped in my head. You knew what you wanted to do at a very young age, at least when it comes to like a job and stuff. So that particular
Yeah.
area of your life, you were very clear on,
Mm-hmm.
and that has proven to be, successful and good for you
Mm-hmm.
up until this present day. And then, there's maybe someone like me who took me a little bit longer in the sense, and now I'm not so much talking about a job, but just like me as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
There were some areas of my life that I knew very quickly that were going to be with me the rest of my life. There were some areas of my life that I didn't know until I got, 25, 30 years old. So it's just, it's discovering who you are, what it really is that brings you fulfillment and what
Mm-hmm.
recharges your battery. And then I think once you know that, or at least know some of that, you can then take the proper steps to being like, okay, what can I do to actually participate in self-care. So
100%, man. And really, to be honest with you, man, if you're out there and you're watching something like this, then you're already a little bit, interested in being curious about what's going on underneath the surface of different things. And so set some time aside to become intentionally curious about what is
yeah.
it that you're feeling? What is it that you would like? What is it that would make you feel better? And what is it
Hmm.
that makes you feel worse? And sometimes doing those kind of mental exercises can help you figure out and pinpoint certain things. And I'll give you an example. We talked about this all at different times before. We never said it on
Hmm.
camera, but the thing is, dude, like I know me, and like you said, one of the things that I knew early on was I wanted to do this. I wanted to do mental health. I've known that since middle school. I didn't have a
Hmm.
backup plan. I put it all in that basket, and thankfully it worked out. But one thing that I didn't realize until I was in my late 20s and early 30s is I have a hard time, you know, reducing the intensity that I approach certain things with. And so as we've talked about, I've had to kind of like intentionally set aside time to not intentionally do anything. Right? Like I
Hmm.
have to plan to relax. And
Yeah.
that could sound kind of backwards to some folks, but I have to like set aside time and money and whatever to
I mean, I'll
intentionally
admit
be like,
the first time I heard it, it was backwards to me, just because that's such a foreign
yeah,
concept to me. But I think that's why this works so well. So
right, exactly, man. And when I found out, Landon, I hate the beach. And I know that's controversial, and I'll take stones getting thrown at me. That's fine, but dude, the beach is just not it for me. And now,
yeah,
according to social media, that's where it all, or not all,
that's
but
where
that's where
all
a lot
life's
of it.
problems are solved.
Yeah,
All
hundred
of them.
percent on a beach, chilling,
Just go to a beach.
no responsibilities, no nothing like that. I don't find that fulfilling. I think it's hot, it's sandy. That's just there's a lot of people. Like none of that sounds good. In fact, you've been with me to the beach. So
I have.
I'll do it if I need to. But my
Hmm.
mind is like, all right, what we getting to eat after this? Because
Dude,
like
I was just about to say, I know what's on Justin's mind is where we
yes,
eat.
sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir. And
yeah,
where's the ice cream at? And, that's because like that kind of stuff is like what I enjoy a lot.
sure,
You know what I mean? Or
absolutely.
going and doing different things. So I just have to accept the beach. The beach just ain't for me. And bravo to the people
Yeah.
who do find it fulfilling. I'm glad they do, but that just ain't me. And maybe one
What
day
about
it
the
will be.
mountains? What
Well,
about
I've
the
never been.
mountains?
I've never been to the mountains actually.
Really?
Yeah, dude. I'm telling you, this
Well,
whole
it's
self care
not
thing is real
sandy
new.
and it's not hot, so maybe that's more your speed.
Yeah, yeah. And here's the thing with me. Like, one of the things I noticed is I enjoy alone time, and so when it comes
Hmm.
to like certain things, I need to like intentionally not do that. Like I need to go with people to certain things, to
Mm.
because I naturally will neglect certain things,
Now,
not even on purpose.
I will say I do relate to you in that sense that I also enjoy my alone time, but I've also caught myself in moments where I'm doing it to my own detriment, where okay, not now am I not only spending time away from friends, now I'm spending time away from like family.
Mm.
And not to say that you need to be with family all the time, but but it's like anything else, right? You do too much of it, you can start neglecting other areas of your life. So that in that area, I think we are very similar because we both are pretty independent people. So
Right. And if anybody's out there and they're curious about themselves and where they're at, dude, find somebody and talk to them about it. You'd be amazed at the kinds of different corners you can explore when you're just in a conversation with somebody about self-care, what they think it means and what you think it means and how it all can kind of fit together. But in general, it's about a balance. There is a whole lot of needs that we have. Because there's a whole lot of things that we have to navigate on a daily basis. Everything from how we physically feel to how we mentally feel, on up through our sense of responsibilities and roles that we carry, from the place that we're employed to the people that we impact to our sense of fulfillment in the things that we do, even higher than that to our sense of existential feelings about what's going on in our nation, in our world, maybe even higher than that, what we feel like is going on in the spiritual realm. Like there's a whole lot of stuff that we have to navigate, and that takes resources, that takes energy, that takes effort, and we have to be intentional about where that effort is getting spent and how much effort is getting spent, because we need to know when does that stuff need to be replenished, and if it needs to be replenished, then how it gets replenished is determined on what the need is.
yeah. Something I want to quickly add on to the end here. It's been floating in the back of my head throughout the episode, and it's something that I've also personally experienced in my own life. As far as like trying to find things, and this goes out to anyone, maybe they don't know, what they can do to take care of themselves a little bit better. Maybe they haven't quite figured out everything that they want out of life, so to speak. For me, I want to encourage people, take risk and maybe do something different that you normally wouldn't do. You could discover that it actually is something you can use for self-care down the road. One quick example for me, and this was actually something I discovered when I was in college, and to some people, and when I say this, I can already like hear it over the waves of the internet. Some people are gonna be like, "What? That is really weird," but I promise you, at least for me, it works for me. I absolutely love going to a movie by myself. It
Mm.
is awesome. Um, there's, I think the first time I did it, I definitely was in college. I think it was like a Sunday afternoon, and there's just something different about it, man. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it is it's almost like taking yourself out on a date in a lot of ways. And
Hmm.
for me, that is very much like self-love, self-care, all that. So, anyways, I say that to say, to some people hearing that, that's like the weirdest thing. They just can't find themselves doing that. But for me, and the first time I did it, like I was like, man, I don't know, this is gonna be like a first and weird for me. But now, looking back on that moment in my life, it's something that I now have in my back pocket.
There
That
you
like,
go.
if I need a little bit of a getaway from everything, I'll just go see a movie.
There you go.
Um,
Can I tell you something weird that I do on a fairly regular basis?
yeah, yeah, do it.
Yeah, man. So I discovered probably about a year ago that one of the things I really enjoy, again, like I mentioned, I am interacting and talking with people, usually about deep stuff, fairly regularly, all the time. And then in my
Mhm.
personal life, I take care of certain responsibilities on an emotional level for several people. And so my alone time is, like I mentioned, pretty nice. And one of the things I discovered about a year ago, one of the things I really enjoy doing from time to time, Landon, is this is gonna sound crazy, but I I have a little small backpack that I like to pack full of stuff in it, and I'll put my headphones in and I'll go for a walk to the gym, which is about 2.5 miles away from where I am, and
Mhm.
I'll go to the gym. I'll do a workout, and then immediately after that, I'll walk over to this local taco stand that's right there, and I'll sit down and bust down some tacos, and then walk 2.5 miles back. The whole ordeal takes about 3 hours, three and a
Yeah,
half hours. And but dude, I'm just in my vibe, man. I'm chilling. I'm getting the physical
yeah.
stuff. I'm getting the stimulation from the podcast normally or whatever it is I'm listening to. I'm getting the workout in, and I'm getting tacos, man. And
I actually
what better
love that.
combination is that, you know?
I actually love that for you because to me that almost sounds like you've taken a lot of the things that Justin loves and you've condensed it into like a mini day for you. So like
Hmm.
for those 3 hours, it is just that's time for you. I mean, working out. I mean, that all checks the boxes for Justin as long as I've known you. So I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So if anybody out there, man, if you guys are curious about anything that we talked about, you want us to go a little deeper on certain things or maybe approach it from a slightly different angle, there's a bunch of different ways we could have went with it. It's just for the sake of time. Obviously, we have to kind of tailor it down a little bit. But if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to read the comments and see what you guys think.
Yeah, please leave us a like and give us a follow. Again, we're on Spotify, YouTube, and TikTok under Mental Caffeine. And let us know, if this sparked any thoughts or anything. Let us know, and if you have a topic idea, let us know. We'd love to talk about that stuff as well. So I think now's probably a good time to wrap up. So for Mental Caffeine, I'm Landon,
And I'm Justin.
and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.